Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Sony Alpha A7R. In the past, I've already reviewed the less expensive full-frame mirrorless interchangeable A7 that Sony launched alongside this camera, and the R really is just a higher resolution version that also offers, or I should say omits, the low-pass filter to offer you the highest resolution possible beyond just the extra megapixel count. It also yields a louder shutter noise, which it has received some flack for, which I think is really an unwarranted critique of a camera that in just about every way is a game changer for the entire industry, no matter who you are a fan of when it comes to camera preference. In terms of glass compatibility, because it's E-mount based, much like the NEX cameras before it, it can be used with a wide variety of legacy glass, even though everything you're seeing here is actually E-mount native. The lenses on the left and right hand side, I've got the SELP 18 to 200 power zoom lens, and then I've got the E-mount 10 to 18 wide angle lens. Both of these have optical steady shot. The power zoom also has active steady shot because it is optimized for both still and video, but really specifically video work. And both of these, of course, are designed for aps-c, unlike the full-frame SEL 24 to 70 Carl Zeiss glass that you see right now mounted on my A7R. So part of this update, beyond just talking about the A7R and my experience with it, is also the performance of the glass ecosystem, at least natively, that I've been working with the A7R right now. And that's because, as I mentioned, you can go legacy and use adapters and manually focus, but the majority of users out there want autofocus capability. And that's why I have lenses right here that all represent that. Now, they're relatively expensive. This is still a $1,200 lens on its own. The wide angle, which really is one of my favorite. I mean, look at how small this lens is. Really a fine example of what can be accomplished with aps-c glass when Sony really goes after the prize. Constant f4 across that 10 to 18 range, and just really a great lens in terms of build quality, performance. Yes, there is some distortion, but it gives you, a great range. And it does actually work with the A7R from about 13 to 16 in full frame without any cropping issues. So you don't have to shoot the full frame, the crop mode with the 10 to 18. So the SEL 10 to 18 somehow, well, it's just a matter of engineering, got around the system on that one. The SELP, on the other hand, the 18 to 200 zoom lens, which is amazing when it comes to a mirrorless zoom because of the control that you have. You can switch in and out of power with manual. You can zoom like you always would, or switch over to power zoom, control the speed settings, and use this toggle right here to give yourself as dramatic, as professional a feel on video as you could possibly imagine, and at a price that isn't in pro league. I mean, yes, $1,200 is a lot of money, but considering what Sony's making viable at these price points, it's very, very impressive. But of course, when we think of full frame 36 megapixel goodness being exploited properly, you really want a full frame option, because both of these lenses, I did mention this will work full frame, but this one in crop mode will yield 15 megapixel stills with the R. If I was using the A7 that I reviewed in the past, you're looking at 10 megapixels in crop mode. And this really is unusable in the full frame mode, so keep that in mind. But that's really what makes the R so attractive to me, and why I wanted it from the beginning, because it really was the only way that I could keep some of my favorite E-mount glass from my aps-c use and still make it relevant. In fact, possibly still keep it not just relevant, but actually as go-to glass, because when I think about the mega zoom that's coming out, or it's not mega, but the 70 to 200, which is going to look like a mega zoom because of the sheer size, because it will also have an f4 constant aperture like the Zeiss 24-70 here, it's going to look like a bazooka when attached to this camera, as opposed to this zoom lens, which at that 15 megapixel rating is going to give me about I think around 28 to 300 millimeters in range, something around there. Correct me if I'm wrong, of course. But the point is that if I can get 300 millimeters with the 15 megapixel crop, that's not too shabby without having to go out of pocket. Not everyone is in this position, obviously. If I was starting from scratch, I'd rather put 1200 towards the larger zoom, but you do give up some things. You will have the full frame capability. You'll have weight to match, of course. You can see these lenses are almost the same size. The only real difference is the fact that we've got a motor built in, and that makes this lens inherently heavier. But that, again, that G-Glass, that 70 to 200 native $1,500 lens that's going to come out is going to be tremendous. That's why it actually has a handle. And on top of that, no power zoom, clearly. It's a still imaging lens first, whereas this is not. So this is part of why I really love this pairing right now. Expect more samples from me. I know you haven't seen a lot out of the R yet, but you will from both the Zeiss as well as from E-mount, older E-mount glass like you see before you. And that's what has made me really happy with this. With the A7, 10 megapixel performance in crop mode out of these lenses really was not satisfying. But to be able to get 15, which is almost what I was getting with the NEX6, which was my daily driver in the mirrorless world, now I'm on even footing. I feel like it's a much more comfortable environment. I feel like I haven't sacrificed anything. I still have amazing range. And for the most part, this does live right now on the A7R because this Zeiss zoom lens really does deliver performance that you can get Zeiss performance with Sony's aps-c cameras, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to have full frame capability, nor will you have a 36 megapixel sensor like you have here. The ergonomics far better. The manual controls across the entire camera are far superior. The tilting LCD, same class as the NEX and Alphas before it, but they did actually change the format of the screen, the aspect ratio, and it works nicely. And relocating the electronic viewfinder, that OLED best-in-class viewfinder up here to the center rather than being flush on the left, which was a clean look and compact and spoke to form factor, it was far from ideal, especially for anyone who planned on shooting for long periods of time and had to use their left eye like myself. In terms of ergonomics, a lot of people complain about having to get used to this grip. It was pretty natural for me right out of the gate. In fact, I gave Sony a lot of credit. You're not going to see it with this lens mounted, but just the way they changed the grip, you see the indentation there. So it's not just the NEX6 or NEX7 grip ported over, it's much more than that. The Wi-Fi and NFC just take the camera over the top. It's the modernization that really needed to be there, and if it wasn't, everyone would have said, how could they have not incorporated it when it's in every other camera they're making right now, especially that has any sort of significant cost. But in my opinion right now, you're not going to do better than this. The weather sealing has been an issue. I haven't had any problems with it, nor have I really tested it, but Sony's pulled it from their website, and Sony Alpha Rumors has been reporting on this for a while. I hoped it was incorrect. There's been talk about the light leakage, which I haven't experienced firsthand, but that's an issue that people have tied to it and believe it's kind of the gap, the hole in the entire weather sealing system here. But we'll see if Sony comes forward on that. My only real wish so far with this camera, much like the A7, is the video record button. I wish there was a way for them to have found a place to put it here, but there are buttons everywhere. I mean, look at the layout. It's so tight already and so customizable still. I mean, dedicated exposure compensation, and both of these dials are programmable. You can program a bunch of the buttons here beyond just the C1 as well as C2 right there. And just everything works really well. The proximity sensor for the OLED being top mounted, again, much better than being side mounted. It's less apt to be triggered by your hand when you're moving around the menus here, had it been side mounted like a lot of Sony's less expensive cameras. And these are all features that are there with the A7 as well. But I have to say, when I take shots with the R, the level of resolution is just mind-numbing. When I shoot things with the RX1 or the A7, I'm already blown away by what they're able to achieve. But then when you shoot with a camera like this with lens or a piece of glass to match, like this one right here, it's just a whole new world to what you're able to accomplish in this form factor. And the same applies to video. This does, have optical steady shot, as do both of these lenses I mentioned before. If you go with any of the other native FE lenses for the A7R, such as the 35mm f2.8, the 55 f1.8, you're not going to have steady shots. So keep that in mind. The only other lens with steady shot is the kit lens, the SEL 2870, and if budget is not an issue, you should be going with this. I know a lot of people that, believe it or not, have picked up the A7R and bought the kit lens at $500 simply because they felt this was an overpriced, rebranded or rebadged kit lens, and I can tell you right now, it's the farthest thing from it. It is nowhere near being even a slight upgrade. It is a tremendous upgrade from the kit glass included with the A7, and that's not a knock against the A7 kit glass. It's just Sony clearly defining the difference between two different levels of quality and competency to match two different sensors, really, and they should have made this a kit unto itself. I've said this already in other videos. But again, this video is all about my experience with the A7R so far, and the fact that this lens works beautifully, as does my power zoom and crop mode, so much so that I'm wondering if I'll even bother with the actual full frame. The FE 70-200 tells you a lot, but that's more about also the size compromise, wanting to keep this a light package, and accepting that this zoom lens already, with its crop capability, when you do go 1-for-1 in pixel peep, is just amazing. So many times the images look like they're coming out of a prime piece of glass. Of course, low light restrictions because of that f4 aperture do seem to push me towards picking up the 55mm, so don't be shocked if that ends up happening. But so far, really enjoying this camera. Can highly recommend it to anybody on the fence, even though this isn't the full review. The clean menus, the build quality, everything that's there with the A7, combined with just a superior sensor and glass that really can leverage it, makes it one of the best cameras ever made. And in terms of, the game-changing elements that it delivers, it really is redefining not only expectations, but also what we're going to see physically in the marketplace a year from now, 2 years from now, not only from Sony, but from all of the competition, because this has begun a trend, in my opinion, because it's actually pulled in the pros, and that's something that Canon and Nikon have been watching very closely, and it's worried them. Sony hasn't been able to get that crowd so far, in large part. This is the camera that has begun to do it. Far from perfect, but the beginning of what may be a mirrorless legacy for Sony, a company right now that's struggling in just about every area other than PS4. So hopefully even better things to come. I expect incredible things from the next generation of this camera, considering I'm just blown away by everything it has, from sensor, performance, the actual footprint. Battery life is probably the only shortcoming. You can pick up a vertical grip and double that battery life, but at a little, roughly around 300 shots and change on a battery, it's not awful considering the batteries aren't expensive. But fantastic camera, folks. Really enjoying it. And if that's what you were waiting to find out, hopefully this video has delivered a clear and, well, I won't say concise by a lot of your standards, but at least by mine, a concise response to that question exactly. Hope you enjoyed. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.